Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to Shiur in the Sicha in Parsha Vayakhel and Chelek Yud-Alef Likkutei Sichos, part of the project Likkutei Sichos. As Akdome, I want to mention that for whatever reason, B'Hashgacha Protis, the Eibishter made it that many of the yeshivas and the mekoimus kibbutz of Torah, the rabbim, for whatever reason, is bottled to some degree, although there are certain restrictions and certain eitzes of how to learn Torah the rabbim. It's certainly a remez from the Eibishter that we have to strengthen and learn Torah the rabbim, or bar rabbim, through other mediums, whether through telephone calls and other ways. So first of all, Ashrei Chelkom Begedol Schusam from the Ma'argenim that we're able to put this all together. And there's no question about it that we all need to be mechazik ourselves at this time. And the greatest chizuk that one can have is certainly through a chizuk of limud Torah. Because Torah is megino matzla. Torah protects us from any problems that we might come across, and especially at this time where the Welt shokelt sich, we certainly can utilize and use the Hagana from Torah. Likewise, anyone who for whatever reason is not feeling well, we all know the famous Gemara that Chosh Bereisha Yasek B'Torah. And the Rebbe explains in many places, why do we find that a person who's Chosh Bereisha, he learns Torah, and we see that Lav Davke, the Torah is Merapim, takes away the Ke'ev Roish, because every Yid has a Chelek in Torah. And it has to be that particular Chelek in Torah that's connected to him or to his Ke'ev Roish. And it's not always that he's mechavin to that particular Chelek in Torah. L'chi oida yesh loymar, that learning Likkutei Sichos, haliba de nafshei, l'chi oida certainly has a direct connection to us. Likkutei Sichos and the Rebbe's Torah, it will certainly take away and give it a full shleimer. But b'neisef lazeh, I just want to add, yes, that the Rebbe's Torah actually is kelel all chalokim of Torah, pshat, remesh, drush, seid, chassidus, kabbalah, ma'aseh b'peil, heroes l'peil, halacha, all chalokim of Torah we find in Likkutei Sichos, especially together with the ha'aras in Likkutei Sichos. So in addition to the fact that we're becoming mekusha to the Rebbe, and it's our chelek in Torah, and it's certainly going to be a chosh bereisha yasek b'Torah to take away the ke'ev roish, Pashit, it makes also sense, b'poil mamish, that learning and having a shiur and a chizuk in the Likkutei Sichos, which should kelel all chalokim of Torah biyachat, we're basically certain to be able to reach our chelek in Torah, whether it's pshat, remesh, drush, sod, or any of the other chalokim in Torah, and especially chassidus, as it's mevur barucha and kuntas and yomash al Torah chassidus, how chassidus gets to the etzem, and that's what Likkutei Sichos is, to kelel everything Torah achas shlema. It will certainly give the refuah to us chassidim, and through us chassidim also bring a refuah le'olam. And we'll start the Sicha Parsha Vayakhel. Kvar duber kama pomim shedarkei shel Rashi b'pirush al Torah lefaresh kol dover hakoshe b'pshuti shel mikra. We know it's a derech of Rashi to explain everything that's difficult to understand al pi pshuti shel mikra. Kol underlined, because if they wouldn't say the word kol, you could never have a kasha. Why Rashi doesn't explain something? Because we would just say that this is one of the places that Rashi was mashmit. That's why the Rebbe writes kol always. And anytime there is a shaila in Pshuti Shal Mikra, Rashi doesn't explain it. That guf is a raya. It must be that according to Rashi's havana of the psukim, it's not shver. Therefore, Rashi doesn't even have to explain the biur because it's obvious. So inyan muvan misparish me'atzma, it's an obvious teretz to the kasha, or it's l'chatchila not a kasha. So based on this hakdama, says the Rebbe al pi tzarich lov in time mishar Rashi, Mesha eni meir biyishuvam shel kushis pshutes l'cheira hamisoireis belimud apsukim arishonim de parsha sein. When we learn the psukim in the parsha and we analyze and dissect the words of the Torah, some obvious questions come across. And Rashi doesn't say one word about it. Maybe if the Sicha would have been written in Yiddish, maybe the Rebbe would even refer to sometimes as a klotz kasha. A klotz kasha by the Rebbe meant an obvious question. Not a stupid question, chas v'sholem, but an obvious question. What's the obvious question? At the beginning of the parsha, it says like this: Vayakhel Moshe Gomer es kol adas bnei Yisrael vayomer aleihem. It says the word vayomer. Ela hadvarim asher tziva Hashem la'aseh yisosom. Sheishes yomim teyosim melocha uvayim hashvi'i Yelochem kodesh Shabbos Shabbosai. Hatzivui al shmiras Shabbos. Moshe gathered Klal Yisrael together, and he told them the halachis, the dinim, the tzivui of keeping Shabbos. The takef la'achriz, right after, it continues. Moshe continues. Nemar tzivui meleches hamishkan. He continues with the tzivuyim of the Mishkan. The Pasha Trumet Tetzaveh, the Eibishter told Moshe about the building of the Mishkan and the Klei Mishkan and the big day Kahuna v'chulu. And the Pasha's Vayakhel and Pekudei, Moshe Rabbeinu is now telling Klal Yisrael and Betzalel and Oliov, Belev Kol Chacham Lev, how to go about building the Mishkan. Umaktim oidapam, and the pasuk makes a akdome vayomer Moshe again. For the word vayomer, he's standing together with Klal Yisrael the whole time. Vayomer again. Ze adover shetziva Hashem leimer. This is what Hashem says. Chu me'yitchem truma. Go ahead and collect the truma from the Yidden in order to build the Mishkan. Hainu sheshneim. Both of these dinim and mitzvahs, Shabbos and building of the Mishkan, heim alef amira. They each have an amira. El kol adas b'nei Yisrael, to all the Yidden. Now the Rebbe brings the obvious questions that comes to light. Aleph lo machilek atzivuyim lebeis amiros nifrodos v'lo kilolom ba'amira achas vayakhel Moshe vayomer aleim ela hadvarim sheishes yomim chumei yitchem. Moshe gathers Klal Yisrael. He spoke once to Cheder. That's probably what he did. He called them all together and he told them about Shabbos and he told them about building of the Mishkan. So why does it say vayomer twice? It says vayomer aleim about Shabbos, and at the same moment, at the same time that he's talking to the Yidden, it says vayomer vayomer aleim. Ubefrat, you can't say that the Torah maybe meant that it was two different times. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu gathered the Yidden once and he told them about Shabbos, and then he gathered them another time and told them about the Mishkan. So Befrat, Mevur Bepirish Rashi ala Pasuk. Rashi says it was Takeh one right after the other. Why? How do we know? Sheishes Yomim. Rashi says, Hikdim lohem azhoras isur meloche b'Shabbos letzivui meleches hamishkan. Moshe specifically shed Shabbos first before telling him of the Mishkan. V'hainu shatzivi al shmiras Shabbos kan einay ela hakdome leikir tzivui meleches hamishkan. Really, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to tell them about Shabbos b'chlal. He wanted to tell them about the building of the Mishkan. Moshe Rabbeinu needed to tell them about Shabbos to teach us a particular halacha, which the Rebbe is going to bring later, that Shabbos, the Binyan HaMikdash, is not Teiches Shabbos. So the whole point of Shabbos is only as a prat here to make sure that when they build the Mishkan, they're not Mechal Shabbos. Prat bedinei meleches HaMishkan. So really, it doesn't even deserve its own Amira. It was really just as a prat in the Mishkan. The Shaila is even shredder. Why is it two separate amiras? It's befedish one amira. It's a prat in the Mishkan. And I'm adding that it also answers that you can't say that it was maybe at two different times and the Torah didn't tell it to us, because the Pashtus Aksuv Mitzmashma Vayakhel Moshe, they were all standing there. And befrat, it was only a hakdome that the Yidden should know that it's not Mechal Shabbos. Beis Ma'udio Kaloshin Ba'atzivui Al Isur Melocha B'Shabbos Ela Hadvorim Goymer Ashetziva Hashem Lasois Oisom. The Torah says you should keep Shabbos. The pasuk says Ashetziva Hashem Lasois Oisom. These are the things that Hashem tells us that we have to do. Sheishes Yomim Goymer. L'chayda Tevis Lasois Oisom Miut Haresei. Lasois Oisom is extra. We find mitzvahs in the Torah, hundreds of mitzvahs. Actually, Taryag mitzvahs. There are many more than Taryag mitzvahs. Depends how you count Taryag mitzvahs based on the Gemara that we have Taryag mitzvahs, different shittas. But all these Taryag mitzvahs, the Eibishter commands us, doesn't say, by the way, I'm commanding you the mitzvahs to do. Of course you have to do the mitzvah. That's what the Eibishter is telling us. It usually doesn't say Lasois Oisam. Lasois Bechlal. This is what Hashem said. Sheishes Yomim Teyosim Malocha. Oy Ashetziva Hashem Leimer Sheishes. Kibareva Mekoimis. Ukibetzivi Malachas HaMishkan Haba Teikef La'achreze. Like the Siva of Malachas HaMishkan, which comes right after. It doesn't say Lasois. Obviously, it's Lasois. Gimel. Not only does Lasois not belong here, L'chioida, it's hepech of what the Kosov tells us. Why? Hatzivi al Shmiras Shabbos kan einoi al pe'ula chiyuvis. The tzivoy of Shabbos here is not a positive pe'ula chiyuvis of Shabbos. The tzivoy of kum va'aseh, which exists by Shabbos, but that's not what the Torah tells us here. Kim tzivoy limnoyas atzmoi me'asiyo. The pasuk says, "Vayem hashvi yilachem kodesh Shabbos Shabbosoin Lashem kol ha'isa b'melacha yumas," which means here the Torah teaches us not to do melachas b'Shabbos. And lo yisavad oesh b'chol mosh v'seichem b'yem ha'Shabbos, which big machlokes as Rashi brings, if avodah l'lav yotzes or avodah l'chalek yotzes. But the nekuda is to be shomer Shabbos. In Cain, not only are the words is some extra, elo the loshen asiya in a masim lozer. The word asiya doesn't belong here. Befrat kishenemer besmichos letzivi melechas hamishkan shehutzivi lepul chiyuvis chume yitchem truma l'Hashem. Befrat, where does it say lasis oisam b'Shabbos? The next mitzvah, which is Mishkan, it doesn't say lasis oisam. Therefore, uklap elaya, it should have been just the opposite. The shom leikos of loshen zeh doesn't say lasis. You could answer that the lasos goes on the Sheishis Yom and Tassim Melocha. Maybe the Eibishter is telling us the lasos is talking not on Shabbos. The lasos is the chiyuv to work during the 6 days. A person has to work. Ubayim Hashvi Shabbos Shabbos. But the based on, we all know the famous Sichos of the Rebbe that the Lashon is Sheishis Yom and Te'osim Melocha. That even when we work, it has to be, but this is a little bit of Drush, Abish did not Pashim Pshat in the Sicha or in the Pasuk. Sheishis Yom and Te'osim Melocha. That even the work that we do during the 6 days has to be be'efen shel te'oseh, b'derech memele, because birchas Hashem hi tashid, u'berachach Hashem alekecha b'chol asher taseh. The taseh only has to be one as a keli kilo for the bracha of the Eibishter, because the bracha is only shared on the keli. So even the avodah of the 6 days is be'emes, not in the oifen of pu'ula chiyuvis, it's a pu'ula chiyuvis b'derech memele, like it says in the pasuk sheishis yomim te'oseh malachan, yigia kapechal kiseichel b'chulu b'chulu, as the Rebbe is masbid in the other sichos. So the whole idea here of the Sheishis Yomim together with Bayim Hashvi, Shabbos Shabbosin, Yilachem Kei, Shabbos Shabbosin, is a Pu'ula Shlilis, not to do Malacha b'Shabbos. Pitom, it says over here, the Torah says, Lasei Soisim, it's the Chastire L'Chere. Kimuvan, the Rebbe says in the Ha'orah 9, that obviously you could be mefadish, the word Lasois means L'Kayim, not to Pu'ula Chiyuvis, but to keep the mitzvah, because you could be Mekayim, Kimuvan, we're Mekayim, the Ramach mitzvah says, so we're also Mekayim by not doing an Aveda, the Shasam mitzvah lo says. So Kimuvan, if we wouldn't have another biur, we could give a biur to the word Lasois, meaning L'Kayim. Ober, L'Cha'ere, if it had to say already Lasois, L'Kayim, it's more Geshmak if you're going to write it by one, by mitzvah saseh. If you would say not the word, you wouldn't say the word Mekayim by mitzvah saseh. You'd only say Mekayim by mitzvah loy saseh. Why are you saying Lekayim by loy saseh? Lasis, I'm sorry, by loy saseh, and not by mitzvah saseh? You have a teretz. We can't question that Lekayim, Lasis over here means Lekayim. But if the Torah writes Lasis by the mitzvah loy saseh, kilu shmiras Shabbos, and by the mitzvah saseh, the positive idea, the chume yitchem, the pu'ula chiyuvis, it doesn't say Lasis. It's shver. You have to have a beer. Dalet. People the Rashi shuv leil sheikar kavana bas haras Shabbos kan einoi lahazid aklolos in yishmidas Shabbos. He said before that the only reason why the Torah says Shabbos here, based on what Rashi says, hiktim shmidas Shabbos lasiyas hamishkan, to teach us a prat in asiyas hamishkan that it's not deicha Shabbos. Hula hidia prat lahazid the melechas hamishkan einoi deicha isum locha b'Shabbos. Hava liletzavoisom tchilo melechas hamishkan. Va'achar Yosef haprat yitzav ala Shabbos. Loy mar she'ein deiches Shabbos. L'cha'era, you say the ikir, and then you say the prat. First, you have to tell the Yidden that you have to build a Mishkan. Vertach hashayla, we already know about Shabbos because we heard Shabbos from Sai from Moro and Sai from the Eibishter already in Aseres Adibus. We know about Shabbos. Hold your horses. By the way, you still have to keep Shabbos. But first, tell us about the building of the Mishkan. So the Rebbe in Order 11, we'll learn Order 11. Biram and the other Mefarshim say, Mashikosav hiktim lehem as horas Shabbos letzivi melechas hamishkan. Loy mar she'ein deiches Shabbos. They say the reason the pshat is azay. The loy tema the tamas smichus uleima lehepich shemelechas hamishkan deiches Shabbos l'chaere. If you put Shabbos and the Mishkan together, why are we so sure that the pshat in the pasuk is that binyan hamishkan, melechas hamishkan is not deiches Shabbos? Adar, maybe we're telling you it is deiches Shabbos. That although I told you to keep Shabbos, nevertheless the Mishkan is deiches Shabbos. Says these mefarshim, that's why Rashi says hikdim. Kivan the koso betchila parsha Shabbos ve'achkach parshas melechas hamishkan vaday oisu shekoso betchila hu iker v'ashen nitches mipona. We have a klal. Whatever is iker, you say first. So Moshe Rabbeinu, if he wanted to tell the Yidden that binyan hamishkan is not deiches Shabbos, he had to say Shabbos first. Even though l'cheira it's a tofel, even though it's only a prat in binyan hamishkan. Because had he not said Shabbos first, the Yidden would have said, hey, Mishkan is more important. Mishkan is more choshev. And the reason why Moshe is telling us Shabbos to teach us that I feel a Shabbos, you have to build the Mishkan. So the Chayra, that answers this kasha, why it's first. Zog the Rebbe no, aval kosher lefarish kein. Why? Sharei, skip the Chotzigel, because it already says in Pashas Kisiso, in the Torah, when he tells us about the Mishkan, the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's in the Torah, but remember to keep Shabbos. Upirush Rashi lemayet Shabbos in Meleches HaMishkan. So obviously the fact that they're together, it can't be a stira to Pasha Kisiso. When you read this Pasha, you would never think that Meleches HaMishkan is Deicha Shabbos, because I already know from Pasha Kisiso, that you have to keep Shabbos. So why are they together? Obviously that it's not Deicha Shabbos. So that can't be the reason why it's Hiktim. There must be a different reason why it's Hiktim, why it's first. Rashi says Hiktim. It's mashma from Rashi that the raya is from the fact that it's Hiktim. Masha kosav Rashi, Hiktim, Meforshim say, the Reim writes B'Shem Yesh Meforshim, Hiktim, lavdavke, elakushte de milsenokat. In other words, you could kvetch Hiktim the way you sing dem word. You could sing the word Hiktim. You know why it's first? Other Hiktim. It happens to be first. That's the reason. For whatever reason, as we'll learn later, why it's first. And the fact that it's first, the fact that Shabbos is besmicha, to Meleches HaMishkan, that teaches us that Meleches HaMishkan is not Deicha Shabbos. But the Kedima alone is not the raya that it's not Deicha Shabbos, because we already know that it's not Deicha Shabbos. When Ela come on to Adar 29, we'll learn Adar 29 why Taka says in Rashi Hiktim, in addition to what we just said, Kushta the Milsa Naka, that's Taka the truth. That's why it says Hiktim, because it's Taka first, the Poil. Hey, you say to Mizu, not only is it a prat and therefore it should be second, it's also not in the Seder the way we heard it from the Eibishter, the way Moshe heard it from the Eibishter. Go back to Pasha Kisi, so you'll see. First, he had the whole arichis of Meleches HaMishkan. And the Azhara, and the Azhara, the fact that the Eibishter told Moshe, make sure you're not Mechal Shabbos, is Kamesha Kosav. Afterwards, don't be Mekel to be Deicha Shabbos from Pnei Eisem Melocha, meaning Meleches HaMishkan. Even though you're going to be very excited, and making sure to do the Melocha, to do the Meleches HaMishkan properly, but you have to remember when it comes Shabbos, you have to stop in middle of the Bren, in the middle of the Koch. Shabbos, al titchem miponeo. How do we know? Kikol achin v'rachim miyutimim, because every time it says achin rachim, the Torah it's a mute. And here Rashi says it means l'mayit Shabbos mimeleches hamishkan. So be'emes, Moshe Rabbeinu heard l'peil mamish from the Eibishter, Shabbos secondary to the din of Meleches HaMishkan, and taka afterwards bepeil to Shabbat and Meleches HaMishkan. So why over here is Shabbos mentioned first? These are obvious questions, klotz kashas. You read Pashas Kisiso, and you come to Pashas Vayakhel, and these kashas, all these kashas that the Rebbe asks, the Rebbe always say, varfen sich far the egen. You see they're obvious. And Rashi doesn't say one word, ein kel ve'ein ein. There must be something that's obvious in this pasuk, and one word, at least one word that teaches us to have a different cook on what the pasuk means, which will answer all these kashas. Which Bechlal, we learned the Rebbe's Rashi Sichos, that's one of the reichkeiten of the Sichos is that the Rebbe takes usually one word, one nekuda, and if you take that nekuda and you realize that we mean Bechlal something totally different, all the kashas b'derech hamela go off. They're not pshat, they're kashim tateretz. Chatchil nishkin kasha. Abir boze. Shas tzivui meleches hamishkon, kishachozar Moshe v'tzivui al azhoras Shabbos, loymar she'ene deche es ha-Shabbos. When Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded about the Mishkan, and he was told not to be Mechal Shabbos, and now Moshe is coming to Klal Yisrael, Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael, and he's telling them, by the way, you have to build the Mishkan. This is what he wants to tell them. Derech Agav, you should know, you can't be Mechal Shabbos. You might get busy, you might be excited, you might have a great koch to actually go ahead and build the Mishkan, and chaz v'sholem, you might go into Shabbos. Yeah, I'm telling you, you can't be Mechal Shabbos. So when Moshe repeated this din, Take Moshe Rabbeinu was told clearly by the Eibishter, Achel Shabbos, you have to keep Shabbos. Pasha Siso. Kishemosar azhora lebnei Yisrael, Omer lehem hatzivui horishin v'hoikri bozeh azhoras Shabbos shebaseres hadibros. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he repeated to the Yidden, keep Shabbos, he said, by the way, remember that you have to keep Shabbos because you heard it in Aseres hadibros. Not because the Eibishter told me that Melechas HaMishkan is not Deicha Shabbos. That's true. Of course, the Eibishter told Moshe Shabbos is the Melechas HaMishkan is not Deicha Shabbos. But when Moshe says, by the way, you have to keep Shabbos, which Shabbos did he repeat? Which Shabbos was he telling the Yidden? It was Ki'ilu. He was repeating what it says in Aseres HaDibros. He would start off. Vayakhel Moshe called as mitzvah Vayemer Aleim Zocher Esem Shabbos Lekacho. He was Ki'ilu. He was repeating the Aseres HaDibros. V'diek v'hidgish tzivui shehu tzivui shenemar lehem b'Aseres HaDibros. Now, why did Moshe Rabbeinu do that? They knew about Shabbos already. The Yidden knew that you have to keep Shabbos. So all Moshe Rabbeinu had to do was come and say, Hazechan, you have to build a Mishkan. And by the way, the Eibishter told me you have to keep Shabbos. So Bavela, he told me now, again, you have to keep Shabbos in order to teach me that it's not Mechal, you can't be Mechal Shabbos for Melechas HaMishkan. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu tell them, Zocher Esem Shabbos Lekatche Kilu? He meant the mitzvah of Shabbos that they heard in the Aseres HaDibros, B'chdei Lenamek, to teach them, Lomo Lo Nidche Isur Melechas Shabbos and Melechas HaMishkan. He knew that the Yidden would have a Shaila. Why not? Why is it not Doiche Shabbos? L'chiyere, the Mishkan is such an important thing. The Shechin is going to be shaded by Klal Yisrael through this Mishkan. And as the Rebbe is going to mention later, if we work on Shabbos, the Shechina will possibly, we'll talk later what the Pshat possibly is, be shaded earlier. Isn't it a Gevaldik Ezach to get it finished earlier? Mistama, the Eibishter wants us to work on Shabbos. Mistama. So Moshe Rabbeinu was explaining to them why Shabbos takes precedent over Melechas HaMishkan. What's the difference between Shabbos and Melechas HaMishkan? They're both mitzvahs from the Eibishter. And we have such a klal. We know a klal, esed, deicha leis esed, which means whenever there's a stira, whenever there's a contradiction, the Eibishter told you to do something and the Eibishter told you don't do something else, sometimes it happens, they come together at the same moment. Al derech dugme, we just learned in Rambam Milchas Tzaras. What if there's a tzaras on the milah? Do you do the bris milah because you neshama lecha b'negat tzaras? Yishama lecha b'negat tzaras means you're not allowed to cut off for tzaras. So do you do the bris or don't you do the bris? So still, the Eibishter told me to make a bris. He also told me yishama lecha b'negat tzaras. Is a klal esed deicha leis aseh, to teach me that because a mitzvah saseh is stronger than a mitzvah leis aseh, I know exactly what the Eibishter wants me to do. He wants me to go ahead and do the mitzvah against the lav, because one of them I'm going to be going against the Eibishter. The Eibishter tells us to build the Mishkan. So why tak is it not Deicha Shabbos? As for the Chelek, many other dukmois. One of the rayas we have is from Shatnez by Tzitzis, Gdilam Tasalacha, and Lesil Beged Shatnez. V'chol, men kamen koimen. Hatzivuyim shenemru b'Aseres HaDibros chashivus miyuchedes lehem. Moshe was telling them Shabbos that you heard in Aseres HaDibros is not just a mitzvah. It's not stama mitzvah like any other mitzvah where we might think esed deicha leis aseh. Aleph, why? Aseres HaDibros kosuv, it says in the pasuk Vayakhel Alef, it's called Advar Moile. Pirush Rashi, she'omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aseres HaDibros b'dibur echad. All the Aseres HaDibros were b'dibur echad, which means, even though as the Rebbe is going to say that we didn't hear all of them beprotius from the Eibishter himself, but we did, because Vayakhel Alef is called Advar Moile. They heard from the Eibishter himself all Aseres HaDibros. Including Zocher Esem Shabbos or Shomer Esem Shabbos, because Zocher b'Shomer b'dibur echad nemru. V'lo beis dibros rishenis shomu b'nei Yisrael mepi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We heard this mitzvah directly from the Eibishter. Hello, we heard it from the Eibishter, says Moshe Rabbeinu. Obviously, the Mishkan is not Deicha Shabbos. Gam beis kasher chazer u'pirush kol dibur b'fnei atzmei. Even when afterwards the Eibishter or Moshe Rabbeinu look in the ha'aretz, different shittas, who was pirush kol dibur b'fnei atzmei. And from the Eibishter themselves, they only heard the Nechi v'Layilach and they couldn't handle it. And Heitivu Asher Diberu. The Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu they're right. Therefore, Moshe was the one who told them the rest. Moshe was the one repeating to the Yidden. Legabe shar tzivuyi hatoira sheshomu mepi Moshe. Koil what tzivuyi in the Parsha Sicha. Moshe told the Yidden all the mitzvahs. So is there any mila in the 8 dibrei sa'achrenes that they heard from Moshe over all the other 600 and whatever mitzvahs that they heard from Moshe Rabbeinu? Says Avada. There's a difference. Why? Because those 8 wasn't Moshe telling him his own words what the Eibishter said. Ki hareze pirush hadibur sheshomu mepi HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'dibur echad. Moshe is just explaining to them what they already heard from the Eibishter. It's al derech dugme, if someone, a Rav, says a nekuda to the Talmud, and then he has a meturgimin, And the Meturgiman teaches and explains what the Rav just told the Talmud. Not an oifen that the Rav whispers to the Meturgiman like it used to be his manashas. And then the Meturgiman will repeat it. But the Rav told it to the Talmidim. And he had a Vayakhel, so to speak. And this Vayakhel goes ahead and he expresses and explains what the Talmud heard from the Rav. So when the Talmud hears from the Meturgiman what the Rav said, he rechapsich that everything that he heard from the Rav, this was the pshat. It's al derech when a Rosh Yeshiva or a Magid Shiur teaches a pshat in Tosfos. He's not telling you a chiddush in Tosfos, his own chiddush. He's telling you that this is what Tosfos means. Then when you go ahead and you read the Tosfos, you see, that was the kavanah of Tosfos. It's a pirush of what Tosfos himself says. It's ki'ilu. You're learning the pshat of Tosfos directly without the Meturgiman. Al derech zeh, the Rebbe is saying, u'me'ein zeh l'cha'eda, the same thing. Enoch they had no idea what the Eibishter was saying because it was bedibur echad. They couldn't be koiled the words, the nekudah, what the Eibishter said. But because Moshe Rabbeinu was just mefarish what the Eibishter had already told them, and they heard it, it's ki'ilu. He brought the dibur HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they heard directly to the Yidden. By him being the meturgim in ki kaviyochel, the mefarish, different than Moshe Rabbeinu was a memutza, let's say, when he was giving over other mitzvahs that he heard from the Eibishter. It's a different nekudah. They didn't attribute what Moshe said directly to the Eibishter. They attributed the mitzvahs from the Eibishter. Now Moshe Rabbeinu tells me this is what the Eibishter said, and we know that Moshe is telling us the emes. Now we know what the Eibishter is telling us to do. So it's a nigeya bepeil kilo. We know what to do. We know what not to do. But when Moshe Rabbeinu was mefanish, the words that they themselves heard from the Eibishter, the pirush gives a direct link and connection. This is what we heard from the Eibishter. It's a whole different mitzvah. The Eibishter spoke to us directly, and we heard it, and now we know what he meant. Gimel. Seres Adibris Nemru Bekel Godel Vero Es Akelis. The Seres Adibris were said Bekel Godel, and they saw also the Kelis, which means there was a great Gilui Elikus b'shas of the Seres Adibris. So such a mitzvah with such a great Gilui Elikus has a whole different erech. Number two, I'll call dibur onu hein, as Rashi brings, and every one of the diburim they said hein, 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 lav, lav, hein. They answered. They were mekabel. It was a direct kabbalah from the Eibishter. Hey, seres adibris nemru b'maimer kol yisrael yachad. Umizeh, if the fact that it was told to call Yisrael yachad, that's a meradik yechshivas. Umizeh she'inyem meyuchad b'tzivuyim elu. For some reason, the seres adibris are call Yisrael yachad. Different. V'lochein nemru l'chol Yisrael anoshim v'noshim. Koilu Moshe ve'Aaron. And as the Rebbe brings in the Ha'ara, we just finished in the Chitas and Shabbos in Pasha Kisisa. Unlike the rest of the Torah, when there was a Seder Mesudah, first Aaron went in, and then the Bnei Aaron went in, and then the Skanim went in, and then Klal Yisrael went in. So Aaron heard it 4 times, and Bnei Aaron 3 times, and the Skanim 2 times, and the Yidden only heard it once. There was a whole Seder Mesudah of how Moshe Rabbeinu gave over to the Yidden the mitzvahs of the Torah. For some reason, these are Seres HaDibris. Everybody that was there called, everybody heard this. It's Chshivas Miyuchedes. But Idinyan Bazeh, the Maimer HaMuzgeh, the Rebbe says, Patzivei al Shmiras Shabbos shebeseres hadibris nichlal v'nichpal gam atzivoi demora. U'kamei shenemer baseres hadibris in Parsha V'schanon, in the Aseres hadibris in Parsha V'schanon by Shabbos, by Shomeres in Shabbos Lekatche, it says, Kasher tzivcha Hashem aleikecha, keep Shabbos like I told you, which means it's an extra, it's a double time. The Eibush is telling us like both mitzvahs. Because in Mora they received also mitzvahs Shabbos, they were taught about Hilchos Shabbos. So the Mela, it's an extra Shabbos because it also has the tzivoy of Mora. Pirush Rashi, kasher tzivcha koydem matan Torah b'Mora. Stam a maimer hamuzikah, stam for information purposes. We have this lashon kasher tzivcha a few times in the Torah, and some of the times we know what the Eibishter meant, and sometimes we don't know what he meant. L'moshel, he says v'zavachta in Pashas you should shechta b'hem kasher tzivcha. The way the Eibush Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Klal Yisrael, Kasher Tzivcha Hashem Aleikecha, the way the Eibush commanded you, and we don't find in the Torah Hilchos Shchita. So that's one of the Mefarshim bring. This is one of the rayas from Torah Shebiksav Gufa. In addition to the obvious rayas that Rambam brings, because he told us to put film. Now it doesn't say exactly how to put on film. The Kayetzer Bozeh, all the other mitzvahs, etc., that are in the Torah. It says Beferish Kasher Tzivcha, the way I commanded you, and there's nothing in Torah Shebiksav. The Charaya that Torah Shebalpeh was given together with Torah Shebiksav. Maimer HaMuzgeh. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them this mitzvah of Shabbos, although the Eibishter mentioned Shabbos, derech agav, but he was telling them the Shabbos of Aseres HaDibros. Chen chazar Moshe al Atzivi shebeseres HaDibros mikivon. The Noisef al etzem achshivus shebetzibui zeh. The Noisef on the etzem achshivus that it's coming from the Aseres HaDibros beseder. Aber bozeh omar lehem habir bipshute shel mikra Lama ein melechas hamishkan doiche Shabbos. Moshe was telling them b'pshutei shel mikra why it's not doiche Shabbos. Why? Because Shabbos is from the Aseres HaDibros. And all the 5 things that the Rebbe mentioned, the Milos, or 6 things with the Maimer HaMuzgid of the Aseres HaDibros, that's the reason why b'pshutei shel mikra it's not doiche Shabbos. And the Hora, the Rebbe brings Poshet because Shabbos is a Esev Eloi Sese. It means from the Sfunnu. Shabbos is a Esev Eloi Sese. And there's a klal. Ese is taka doiche Eloi Sese, but Ese is not doiche Eloi Sese ve'ese. Ubemela Mishkan was only an Aseh. Shabbos is a mitzvah Aseh and mitzvah Eloi Sese. Kodesh Ilochem, but b'mchalehom esyumas. And therefore an Aseh is not doiche, an Aseh and Eloi Sese. That's how Pinigla, why it's not doiche. But at this point, the Yidden didn't know all these pratim. Yidden didn't know all these details that Moshe Rabbeinu heard on Har Sinai, the din that ein ese deiche lo yisaseh v'yeseh. So Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to teach the Yidden l'cheira al pi pshutei shel mikra, meaning avada Moshe could have been masbed and malomdis. But the Torah, before we know any lomdis, is telling us the chshivas of Shabbos, why the melechas hamishkan is not doiche Shabbos. But la halacha bepashtus, the reason why it's talking not doiche Shabbos, which is also negate the melecha the beis hamikdash, is because ein nase doiche lo yisaseh v'yeseh. But to those group of Yidden that heard the Aseres HaDibros bepeil, begashmius, not just their neshama, but begashmius, Moshe Rabbeinu said bepashtus, because it's from the Aseres HaDibros. Why did he tell them? Because l'cheira, av shemelechas hamishkan hu inyan ikri. Mishkan is also very important. It's going to bring down the Shechina. Mishkan tishta Shechina b'Yisrael. Mikol mokem muvan. She'ef she'tzivu izeh she'nitztavu achshav mipi Moshe. Al pi pshutei shel mikra. He's telling Klal Yisrael, he's telling us by writing it in the Torah this way, that it's impossible that a mitzvah Moshe is saying that you're hearing from me only, and that I heard from the Eibishter to tell you, Yidche mitzvahs Shabbos, she achas mi Aseres HaDibros sheshomu kol echad ve'echad mi Yisrael pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmei. That it's deiche, a mitzvah that the Yidden heard directly from the Eibishter. Chayre, this has nothing to do with the fact that if a Novi comes to be mechadish dover me'ato, as the Rambam writes, to be eike something in the Torah, that you don't listen to the Novi, because we ourselves heard from Moshe Rabbeinu the din that it has to be kach v'kach, and he can't be doiche. Because first of all, this is Moshe Rabbeinu himself talking, and this could have been a Heiroas Shah just for the Melechas HaMishkan. That's totally not the reason. That's not the pshat that the Rebbe is saying. Moshe is basically telling them, I don't have the koyach to be doiche Shabbos with the Mishkan, because you heard that from the Eibishter, and this you're only hearing from me. That's l'chudah, not the pshat that the Rebbe is saying. Not the pale mamish al derech hanovi who comes to be eker, the mashal to say lech haved avid zora v'kayetze b'zekimavur baruch and the Rambam. No, the pshat is, of course, if Moshe Rabbeinu would say, I heard from the Eibishter to be deiche Shabbos, avada they would be deiche Shabbos. And not only that, Moshe wouldn't have to say anything then. They would be be'etzem be deiche. The be'etzem wouldn't be deiche Shabbos. Moshe had to tell them to be deiche Shabbos. The word is, he's explaining to them that although you might think v'shachanti v'seichem is so important, I'm telling you, I heard from the Eibishter, and Aseres HaDibros is important, and that's why it's taken not deiche Shabbos. Now that we know that this is the pshat, we'll see in the next oyis how all the kashas are answered. This love of Shabbos, or mitzvah of Shabbos, that Moshe is repeating that he heard from the Eibush, that the Yidden heard from the Eibush, they themselves, Aseres HaDibros, that's why it says lasos here. Why? How is he going to be merames here that he means the Aseres HaDibros? Kasha, 2 kashas that I've asked. Number 1, why does it say lasos? Every mitzvah you have to keep. Number 2, it's only Shmiras Shabbos over here. Not to do Malacha b'Shabbos. So Terazei, Aseres HaDibros nitztavu leirak al isur shlilas Malacha b'Shabbos. In the Aseres HaDibros, there's not only Kodesh Ilochem, it's also Ki'im. It says, not only Mechalel Mois Yumas Kilu Shama Zocher is not only the isur of Malacha, but it says Ki'im Gam Zocher is in Shabbos Lekatche. In Aseres HaDibros, it says the mitzvah chiyuvis of Shabbos. V'hainu tzivui chiyuvi. It's a pu'ul chiyuvis to keep Shabbos. Ukepirish Rashi, what's the pshat zocher? Tnuleiv, lisker, tomid, es yema Shabbos. You always have to remember Shabbos, not only on Shabbos, but in Rishon b'Shabbos, and Sheni b'Shabbos, Ushlishi b'Shabbos. Ubenigel tzivui zeh masim shapir aloshin laso is asiyah b'poyo. This tzivui of Shabbos in the Aseres HaDibros, which refers to zocher, es yema Shabbos lekatche. That's why it says laso. So it answers both kashas. It never has to say lasos. That's why by Kume Yitchem, Truma doesn't say lasos. Obviously, it's lasos. Every mitzvah is lasos. Moshe was being merames that he means the Zocher, the Siva Shabbos, Lekatche, B'Aseres HaDibros, which there it's a pull the chiyuvis. And this is the one word. This word, lasos, That's the word that teaches us that Moshe Rabbeinu meant the tzivui of Aseres HaDibros. Because the Rebbe's pshat is a very nice pshat. How do you know? How do you know that when Moshe Rabbeinu was chazering over this word, he taka means Aseres HaDibros? Hashem pshat. We can find a few kashas with this pshat. But the Rebbe is saying that the word lasos, which is miyuted, it's extra, doesn't belong here. That's where the Torah is telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu means the Shabbos of lasos that we learned, the Shabbos of Aseres HaDibros. This answers the other kasha. Why does it say Vayomer twice? Nechluku atzivuyim al asar Shabbos, hamelechas hamishkan bebeis amidas nifrodes beis pamim vayomer gemer. Why? Me'achar shebeis tzivuyim elu hemi beis sugim nifrodim legamli. Since these two tzivuyim are two different types of tzivuyim. Shabbos is a mitzvah that the Yidden heard themselves from the Eibishter, and melechas hamishkan they heard only from Moshe Rabbeinu. Atzivuyim al asar Shabbos hu chazor osei shel Moshe al dibur sheshamu kulam. It's a chazorah of what Moshe, what the Yidden heard directly together with Moshe mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hatzivoy amalechas hamishkan u'masher shama Moshe levad mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amalechas hamishkan only Moshe heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'hu shetzivuhu lebnei Yisrael, and that's what he retold the Yidden. That's why it says Vayomer Aleim. It's talking not the same. The Vayomer also is merambis to us that it means the Shabbos of Aseres HaDibros, because it's a totally different sug b'chlal. Here now move on. One of the kashas were, why is it first? Double kasha. Number one, Melechas HaMishkan came first. Afterwards it says Achas Shabsais D'Shmeir. Number two, it's only a prat in the Mishkan. Why is it first? Hagam shetzivi al Shabbos hu prat ba'ifim Melechas HaMishkan. Ki. Number one, Neisef al Shazeo Aseder. If Moshe is repeating Aseres HaDibros, Taki came first. Ich sheshamu atzivuy mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is Zeo atzivuy al Shabbos sheshamu kvar ba'Aseres HaDibros kinal, because this is the tzivui on Shabbos that they already heard earlier. Ra'idei Zer Romas al Hamayla v'Achshivus Hamayuchedes b'Shabbos shu kodum b'Mayla l'tzivui Melechas HaMishkan. Because it's first, because it's Taki a different type of mitzvah. It's a mitzvah which is more choshev for the 5 reasons mentioned why Aseres HaDibros is different. That's taka why it's first. And that's taka the reason why it's taka not Deicha Shabbos. That's why it's not nitche mipnei Melechas HaMishkan. And the Rebbe writes in Adar 29, that's why it says hiktim, not only because kushtikom it's taka first bepeil, but it's hiktim because it's kedima b'mayla. Based on this, I saw someone asking Akasha and the Sicha, how do you explain how Pshuti Shal Mikro? How's it possible then that all the Avedas HaMishkan throughout the datas, throughout the years, Avedas HaMishkan, Beis HaMikdash is Befeidish Deicha Shabbos? Chodesh Shabbos should take precedent over all the mitzvahs that have to be done in the Mishkan. Pshuti Shal Mikro. Obviously, the Biyur is Pashut because the mitzvah is to bring the carbon on Shabbos. Befeidish, the Torah says to do this mitzvah on Shabbos and Yom Tiv in the Beis HaMikdash in the Mishkan. Just a shtikl word, lav daf gets a teretz, but a shtikl word that enochanami can move on, that it would have been possible for the melechas avedas binyan mishkan to be deicha Shabbos. It could have been possible if the Eibishter would have wanted. L'peil mamish, the Eibishter said achas Shabbos tishmeir. And when you build and you start to build the Mishkan, that's where the Eibishter through Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael the chshivas of Shabbos. That you're going to be so excited to build a Mishkan, you're going to want to even build it on Shabbos. That's where he said it's not Doiche Shabbos. But once Shabbos was already so enforced by Klal Yisrael and kept by Klal Yisrael, that b'shas they built the Mishkan to bring down the Shechina Lamata Ba'aretz. It wasn't Doiche Shabbos. Shabbos made its mark. The Shabbos of Aseres HaDibros made its mark. So it's very easy to explain to a Ben Chomesh L'Mikro that L'Peil Mamish, it's not a Tchiyah of Shabbos to bring the Karbonos in the Mishkan. Because Shabbos was kept when the Beis HaMikdash was built. Ula yesh lemer, lav dafke, this is the proper biur, but ula yesh lemer. Hayro mizeh, because there's one kasha that's still left. Ime yesh det tzivi v'ashoras isim melechas Shabbos kan, hurak prat b'tzivi dem melechas HaMishkan. Enochanami, Shabbos mentioned here, L'peil mamish, why does he mention Shabbos? Only to teach us that melechas HaMishkan is not Deicha Shabbos. That's why the Torah says it, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu told it to the Yidden. He L'peil mamish mentioned and chazed over the Aseres HaDibros. Lei Moshe Deicha Shabbos. Because asoy Moshe inyan ikri b'fnei atzmei. Moshe said, Vayoime, separate. Because he wanted to make it special. Chazar al azhar shebaseres hadibris bonit stavu in Pia Kadosh Baruch Hu al etzem inyan shmid Shabbos. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu decided he wanted to make Shabbos very special, to show how special Shabbos is. And therefore, that's why he chazed over the Aseres Hadibris. The shaila is, what's the point? Moshe Rabbeinu could have told the Yidden without explaining them the reason, without them having to understand, just like all the mitzvahs that they're receiving, that you have to keep Shabbos and dinim and all the other mitzvahs that they learned that not always make sense. Moshe could have said, by the way, it's not Deicha Shabbos. Shabbos is more important. Why did he find it so important to bring out the inyan of Shabbos, the importance of Shabbos, the gadlus of Shabbos? We say to Mizu, the Vayakhel starts off with Shabbos. It's mashma. Why did he gather everybody? Although the Pashup Shat, the pasuk is Vayakhel Moshe to tell them Kume Yitchem, but the Torah starts Vayakhel Moshe. By the way, keep Shabbos. And secondary, he continues with Kume Yitchem. Okay, the Shechina has to come, so you have to build a Mishkan. It's mashma the Ikar. Why did Moshe do that? Says the Rebbe, I'll tell you why. Even when a Yid is involved in the hechste inyanim, the most important thing is the binyan ha-mishkan, which goes through the Mishkan, through the Kedesh HaKadoshim. Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to teach them something. He was trying to teach Klal Yisrael, you should know, I'm telling you this is with Shabbos, but really he means it lagabe everything. Don't, when you get excited and you want to do something good, you have to make sure and to be careful that at the same time, you're not going to chepe an isur. Even if the thing that you want to do, if you're going to be over on the isur, you're going to get the thing quicker. Maybe the Shechina will come closer to you. Still, Moshe Rabbeinu was bringing out the Klal Yisrael to teach them the Chumras Adover. And he starts off with the Aseres Hadibris to teach you the importance. Remember, you have to make sure that we don't go against any isur, even if you want to do something good. Why does it say Efsher took the Mashras Shechina bepashtus Efsher? Because it's impossible that the Shechina will come quicker through doing an Aveda if it's Osir. That's for sure. Stam Lohoir, even if they would have worked on Shabbos, L'cha'ere, based on the Medrash, the Shechina would not have been Nishra any quicker. Because if you make the Cheshbon, it says in the Medrash that Be'emes, they finished on Chof Kislev the Mishkan. The Mishkan was finished Chof Kislev. And it stayed Mekupel all the way to the Chedesh Nissen. And that's when the Shechina actually came down, was when they started to build the Mishkan by the Chedesh Nissen. So the Chayre, even if they would have worked all the Shabbosim from when after Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael to build the Mishkan, they would have worked all the Shabbosim, the Peil Mamish, the Shechina, the Chayre would not have come down any quicker because it would have to wait until the proper day, which later it says in the Medrash, Chanukah happened. This Hayro, obviously from the Rebbe, brings it to us many, many times in many different inyonim, that as much as we're supposed to do Asay Tev, and as much as we're supposed to Mekarev to Yiddish, Yidden to Yiddishkeit, it could never be at the expense of Chaz v'Sholem going against an Isur. I just want to spend mamish a few minutes to speak a little bit about the matziv that we're in right now. There's many different things that are being mentioned and are being said to learn as a lesson from the situation that's going on in the world. Hochel, from the fact that Maise Echod could be Goyim, Yeshua, Vatzola, and the Rebbe used to mention this by Fabrengen, that someone with ein knopke, you push one button and you can destroy the whole world, which we see Bepeil, with ein Shalom Aleichem, Chmon al-Islam. Look what's going on. Is Kemuven with ein Maise, Meruba Mideteva, millions of times, last week's Pasha, 500 times, is Kemuven that one Maise Bepeil could wegen über the ganze Welt, L'kavschus. That's obviously one lesson. And V'koheno Rabbis is teaching us a lesson of what's a want and what's a need, what's necessary, what's not necessary, v'chulu v'chulu. I just want to say a different, as I think in the Kud Mamish. The fact is, zwischen uns, as far as I understand, Whenever there was a behol in the Welt always wanted to hear Vozok the Rebbe. What does Lubavitcher Rebbe have to say? Even those that were not planning to listen, to whatever the Rebbe says, they at least had to know what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. That's the Seder always. And the fact is that Afilu Bisman Hazeh, when there's a behol in the Welt, they want to know Vozok the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and in this case was Tuan of Vozok the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Chassidim. And we see the Poil, the Shluchim in China made a huge Kiddush Hashem in the Welt. They were collecting money for them in different Mekoimis, not dafkith by us. Al-Derech Zeh in other places locally where they were reading the Megillah for people. They were all looking at Lubavitch and looking at us to see what are we doing, how are we acting, how are we coping with this matzav. Now, I'm not a man d'Amar. I don't know exactly how we should cope and what we should do and what we should say. However, we should know, Einei kol Yisrael aleinu, and Einei kol ha'olam al Yisrael, and Einei kol Yisrael aleinu. Whether to say this or to say that aleinu, it doesn't even matter. But people are watching. What are the shluchim doing? What are the Rebbe's chassidim doing? What are the bochrim doing? The Lubavitcher bochrim that are me'ezah sibishati in different places that are not in yeshiva. How are we reacting? Are we reacting by being mechazik the Welt, by being mechazik ourselves through Torah, through miftzoyim we're available and where we're able to do it, and through keeping up with the shiurim, and to be mechazik ish yisraehu. And even if it's not bepil, when you see people, because we have to stay sometimes away from people, but people hear and people know what we're doing for others. And I just want to mention, we're coming from Pashas Porah, just a lesson from Pashas Porah. There's the famous choik by Porah Duma that says that it's metaher es atmeim umetamei es atahorim. Famous medrash, the famous Gemara. And we tend to be taught in school, me'ezah siba shatiyah, and I was taught in school the same way for many years. I didn't know the right pshat. We think that the one who's mazed the me'anido, the one who spritzes the paraduma, also becomes tameh. And that's the taich, that it's metameh, it's metayir es atmeim, but the one who spritzes becomes also tameh. And the kasha you ask your teacher is the chein l'dover soif, so the lomdish teacher will answer, it's a tumah kala, not a tumah chamura. You don't need hazor shlishi shri. All you need is a tumas erev. And the mistake actually comes from a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Umaze meha nido yechabis begodav." The one who spritzes the paraduma has to be table. That's where the mistake comes from. But if you take a look at Rashi, like the Rambam brings it in Nuchas paraduma. We just learned in Perek Tesvav. Rabbi Seinu Amru shahamaze toir. The one who spritzes the paraduma is actually toir. So what's the pshat in the choik that it's metame esatoirim? So it means two things. It means those who are isik b'sreifas achatas, which happened 9 times. So those who were Isaac in the Sreifas Achatos became Tomei. It's Metayir, it's Atmeim, but if you're Isaac with Sreifas Achatos, you became Tomei. And Al-Derech Zeh, if someone touches the Mei Nido Shalei B'Shas Hazor, as Rashi brings, and has the Shiur Hazor, that's why it says Umazer Mei Nido, also becomes Tomei. But the one who's actually Mazer the Mei Nido, which Hakel Kshedim Lahazois, does not become Tomei. How does the Gemara know that? So the Gemara makes a kal v'chemer. Rambam brings the kal v'chemer. How could it be im hu metayir es acherim einei din sheyehei hu toir? How is it possible that if the main need of the parah duma is metayir es atmeim, how could it be that the one that it's isik b'tahara and being metayir somebody else, that he should become tamei from that? That's impossible. But the Lashon HaGemara is a great lesson for us. Im hu metayir es acherim einei din sheyehei hu toir. We are bringing Kedusha and Elikus into the Welt. We are making a Dir B'Tachtenim. Einei Kol Yisrael Aleinu, to be Metaher the Welt, to bring Kedusha, to bring Chassidus, to bring Yiddishkeit, to bring Yadus to the Welt. That's what we're doing. So this Parah Duma teaches us this Kal V'Chemer. Im hu Metaher es acherim, einei din sheyehei hu toir. Doesn't it put an achrayus on us that we also have to make sure that we're doing what's right? Not only klapechutz when we have to be metayed others, but in our own personal avodas Hashem, we also have to be told. And at this zman, when there's a shtickle behol in the Welt, and I might even say hefkeres by the bochrim and by the kids who are not in school, which could bring to prikas oil, we have to be mechazik ourselves and mechazik each other to stay strong and to learn Torah. And there's no question about it that we will certainly see the Maila, because nothing, the Eibush doesn't make anything in the world, only Raz, the Rebbe says many times. We will see the Toiv Shebedover, we will see the Toiv in this whole story. And in Mitzvah Hashem, there will be no suffering and no tzaris. V'ish Yisrael Yazeru U'la'ochiv Yemer Chazak Ad Bias Goel Tzedek Ad Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, and it should be because of Mamish, and we should give the Rebbe the Nachas Ruach because everybody's watching us, watching his Chassidim, and that automatically reflects on the Rebbe, the Nachas Ruach that the Rebbe deserves. Kidei Sheyehei Shem Shamayim, and the Rebbe's nomen Misahev Al Yodcha. Kol Tuv.
Okay, the situation for me right now, what I'm doing, I'm trying to see if I have a place in Melbourne to quarantine myself for 2 weeks, which is the law right now there, and I can't do it at my home because my grandparents, we're renovating, we're staying at my grandparents' home. I'm also looking to see if I have any